going to go on mute and have a great webinar.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Good evening. Hi, this is Melanie Burney, Chairman of the Constitution and Operating Procedures Committee. I'd like to thank everyone for taking time to join in for this important conversation about the proposed amendments to the Constitution. Hope everybody is doing well and staying cool. First, I'd like to start off by thanking Javon from the National Office for putting this webinar together and assisting me with this conversation. And thanks also to Madam President Sarah Glover for the opportunity to chair this committee. And I'd like to thank the members as well of the committee. Some of them will be joining us tonight, but I'd like to acknowledge the members, beginning with founder Sandra Long, former President Will Sutton, former parliamentarian Cindy George, Jerry McCormick, Juan Singleton, and a student member, Janae Adams. So at this time, I'd like to open up for questions. We have roughly an hour. I'd like to hear what's on your mind and any questions that I can help you in this process and to bring any clarity to some of the discussion and the questions that have been raised. So we are now open for questions. Renee Wilson has the first question. Okay, Vinay, I have your question. And Gerard, no, you're not tripping. We're just having a little technical difficulties. So I'm going to ask you to type your questions to me, and we'll do it that way. Okay, so the first question from Vinay is 5 years ago, there was a major push to change the Constitution. There were discussions and webinars to explain the changes and it passed. So why are we unraveling what was done 5 years ago? So the difference between now and 2014 is that in 2014, members voted to create a Constitution Commission under President Bob Butler. And then Butler then put together an extensive committee, much larger than this committee, and it looked at everything from top to bottom. And if you recall, the document that was ultimately presented was a major rewrite of the Constitution. So this time around, we are not doing a major rewrite. We're doing some minor changes to address some issues that we felt were relevant. So the process is different because the document is different. And you know from serving on the board that you don't want to do a major rewrite of your Constitution every year. So we took a smaller view this time, and that's why we didn't do webinars and all of those things, because the process is different and the extent and scope of these changes is a lot smaller than it was 5 years ago. Other questions? I need you to type your questions to me. Thank you, Kathy Cheney. The question is, while the proposals are related, why not have them as separate amendments? I think that's one of the main reasons for the resistance. I'm cool with an appointed parliamentarian, but not with having one VP. I'd like to have had a chance to cast a yes or no for each, not a one-size-fits-all package. And again, I'll refer you back to the Constitutional Commission. Their proposal was a yes or no to the entire proposal. There was no opportunity to vote on individual provisions. And the reason then and the reason now is because they are interrelated. And what could theoretically happen is if we had individual amendments, one, I think that's a little unwieldy for our membership, but also what happens typically when you do that is that voters might approve one and not the other that's related. So for example, there's a provision in the Constitution that outlines the composition of the national officers. And then there's another reference elsewhere in that section that again references, in this case, the academic representative. So theoretically, if members approve one and not the other, we would have a constitutional crisis or conflict because the document would not jive. So you have to really present it together. And in fact, Kathy, the amendment that you proposed could have been included because it deals with membership, but because it came from you and separately from the work of the committee, we put that separately to allow voters a second amendment. So that's the reason that we present them as separate amendments. And unfortunately, it requires you to vote yes or no. There may be some provisions you like and some that you don't, but I would encourage you all to look at the rest of the proposals. There are some good things in there, and we believe that taken together, it moves the organization forward. The last Constitutional Commission proposal had lots of items. There were some in there that I didn't care for, but overall, I thought it was in the best interest of the organization, and I voted yes. So we're hoping that you can see the big picture and support the entire proposal. Okay, Gerard, in the webinar explainer, there is a portion which addresses the increased responsibility of our task forces if the board members were to be reduced. Further, board committees and task forces should be streamlined and given specific objectives to better serve the organization. Can you talk about what some of those objectives in our national organization plan to support task force members in completing them? And that's a good question. It is our recommendation that the board of directors, if this passes, that newly formed board and the new president will take this issue up. What we have observed is that we can get much, much more effective work from our committees and task forces by holding them accountable and giving them clear objectives and asking for regular reports on what work the task force or committee has done. And we believe that the academic members are a strong force. And by working around this, not having a seat at the board, but still meeting regularly, coming up with a strategic plan and work that it wants to do as well. So I think our hope is that both the board and the committees and task forces, which are appointed by the president, will work together to be much more effective than it has been our view in the past. Okay, Kathy had a follow-up question that her proposed amendment would have had no impact on the size of the board, and that is correct. But there is language in the committee proposal that deals with membership categories and classifications. That's what I was referring to, that it could have been folded in with those recommendations. So one of the recommendations is to eliminate the emerging members category of membership. Because we have 7 different classifications of membership, which the board and the committee thought that was too many for an organization our size. So Kathy's amendment will simply clarify who can run for president who's a lifetime member. And we supported that and the board supported it because there was language missing that would make it absolutely clear that you must be a journalist in order to serve as the president. And Kathy, again, if the majority of the members vote no for the package, is the next move to have them proposed separately next time. And unfortunately, I cannot answer that because I serve at the will of the president, and the president is going out of office on August 11th. So that will be something that will need to be revisited. And, you know, our strategic plan made numerous recommendations, and one of them was to look at the size of the board, the composition of the board. So I would imagine that it's something that will need to be revisited and figure out what's the best way to move forward. I would hope that we will continue to have dialogue and look at the Constitution and figure out what's the best way to go forward. And I can tell you that there were other amendments that were submitted that were not endorsed by the committee and therefore did not move forward. So there's always that opportunity for any professional member or the board to bring proposals. And at the board meeting where this proposal was endorsed, some of the board members, and I know you've seen their comments on the listserv, Roland being one, wanted to make changes in the proposals. But of course, our Constitution doesn't allow that. They come in as is. And so, there was discussion too about looking at that. So I would think that going forward, that we would look at the whole process. What other amendments, what other changes? Because as I said, you can't do everything in one fix. There are so many things that you might want to take a look at given the changes in the industry and the changes in the organization, the size, the composition. So I would expect that the next parliamentarian and the next president will continue to look at this document and the process. And just one other thing on the approval, it does require a two-thirds vote. Two-thirds of those voting must vote yes in order for the proposal to be approved. And otherwise, as outlined, it would take effect immediately, except where there are provisions for the various officers. They would leave the board as their terms expire. So there would be a transition period where the board would remain intact and then drop off as their terms expire. So in terms of the academic rep, he would have another year on the board. Okay, two more questions. From Gerard, he's asking, the academic representative position on the board of directors would no longer exist. However, this constituency of 174 members still be well served by its task force or committee representative to advocate, plan new, innovative programming, support journalism professors at HBCUs and other institutions, as well as coordinate timely discussions at the annual convention and training for our students. What is the current mechanism within NABJ for task forces to propose such programming and training? And good question. I would just point to the sports task force, which has really been a model for an effective task force that represents its members, plans programming, raises a lot of money, and is a real force to be reckoned with within the organization. And they include a wide variety of sports members at various levels. So it's not just people in mid-career. You have new journalists, you have veterans, a real cross-section. So I would hold that up as a model of what the task force can do. And again, that constituency does not have a seat on the board, but they have planned effective programming, they have meetings, they have workshops at the conference. The sky is the limit, and the task force should really drive what it sees as the needs of that particular committee and what role it should play. So with this position, this membership category is a new membership category. Previously they were lumped in with associate, but academics can decide if they want to take up the cause of HBCUs, getting tenure for our members, working with curriculum, supporting deans and those seeking to become deans. It's a lot of opportunity to really define that role and programming. Right. So, Gerard, I think I've addressed that, not related to the National Convention, because we know that there's a lot of work that goes on in NABJ outside of the convention. And that's the time that you do all of these things in terms of planning task forces. And art and entertainment task force is another very effective task force, and as well as the visual task force. There are quite a few. I just picked the sports task force because I know y'all have a good time at their parties, but they do a lot more, and that's a key event that raises money to allow them to do that type of programming. John Yearwood asked, what happens if the proposal fails? Would this come up again next year, or will it be 2 years? And as you know, one of the challenges that we currently face is that we're on an annual election cycle. So this proposal would return us to a 2-year cycle. So the answer to that, John, is it would be up to the discretion of the parliamentarian and the next board and president on whether or not to bring it back next, to bring proposals in 2020 or to wait until 2021. So there's no limit. There's no reason not to do it immediately, or it could wait. Okay, and Gerard wants to know, my question is, who is the person, committee, or what online form we need to fill out to be supported by the national organization when we want to create programming? And I don't know that there's an actual form, but what I do know is that the committees and task forces are supposed to submit their reports. So the work that the committee has been doing, who serves on the committee or task force, submit that work to the board for review. So I will, I can see if there's an actual form. I don't believe that there is. And again, this is one of the processes that needs to be tightened up so that everybody is clear on what does a task force or committee need to do in order to propose a program, a workshop, or other activity. Benet asked, can you speak about the changes to media-related members? What was the rationale to require 3 years of journalism experience? And the committee decided to go that route because that was a change in 2014, which required the academic rep to have 3 years of journalism. And so we wanted to make it in sync. So if it passes, it's not an issue. But if it doesn't, that we wanted those two positions to be in line. And the bottom line is that this is a journalism-based organization, and we felt that it would be important to have at least 3 years of experience in that position. Benet says, I understand that this is NABJ, but the media-related members have served the organization well and lent their talents to NABJ. And that is, of course, without a doubt, all of our members are important and play significant roles in contributing to the organization. The media-related members help a lot in terms of sponsorship and corporate relationships, and we welcome that and appreciate that. And we see no reason for that relationship to change, that role and responsibility should continue to grow. The next said, are we still on? I'm still here. I'm waiting for another question. I would like to welcome Michelle Fitzhugh-Craig, who is the election committee chairman. If there are any questions about the election process or voting, she's on the call as well. Michelle is at a park and her microphone is not on. But if you send me your question, I'll get an answer for you if you have an election-related question. Any other questions about the amendment? Wait, Karen Wilson, I'm sorry I missed your question. I see it now. I'm not sure her question. I understand her question, but it says many media-related members manage year-round donor-sponsor stewardship within the corporate entities that employ them. These members advise on which organizations to support and which organizations not to support when they do not align with its corporate brand and beliefs. The proposed language in Section 7 devalues, diminishes, and invalidates the expertise and experience of a pure media-related professional. It further promotes division and exclusion of those employed in the very corporate, government, entrepreneurial outlets with whom NABJ depends on as community partners and funding resource. I'm going to look at the questions. Give me a second. Also from Karen, I think we've addressed this, but the academic representative is a year-round, boots-on-the-ground advocate in the classroom for NABJ. They are responsible for creating and managing student NABJ chapters. They are the professionals teaching and preparing qualified and competent students to enter and excel in all areas of communications, journalism, storytelling, production, and information dissemination. They continue to nurture. And yes, Karen, that is absolutely correct. And we need and want our academic reps, journalism educators to continue to play that role and do other programming and address other issues facing academics in the classroom. And I referenced that earlier in terms of helping our members obtain tenure, helping our members become deans, looking at the curriculum, and doing all of those things. And I would also add that I think that all of us have an opportunity to play a role to mentor and work with students. I certainly know that I do that here in Philadelphia. I have several students who are my mentees. And another question from Karen. How does NABJ continue to serve as an outspoken advocate for inclusion and respect for all people when members within its own ranks aren't afforded the same advocacy of inclusion and respect? How can NABJ have an expectancy that funding sponsors will continue to partner with NABJ if its actions conflict with their brand's beliefs and NABJ's actions appear to devalue the worth and expertise of the very professionals these organizations themselves employ? And while I understand your concern and your passion, and I have heard from a lot of you your passion for the work that you do, nothing can be further from the truth or the intent of this proposal to devalue anyone. I think NABJ has a proven track record for inclusion and diversity, and we have members who represent a lot of different constituencies. But can they all have a seat on the board? No. Our mission as part of this proposal and our charge was to look at how can we streamline the board and make it smaller and more effective. So that was our goal, not to devalue any membership classification. And as I said earlier, I can't say it enough that every group is important and every group is important and every group has a role to play. And our challenge going forward for this next board is going to really be, how can we be a more effective organization with resources that we have and holding everyone accountable? And that's what we said in our presentation to the board. From board members to committee members to task force members, there's a role for everyone. Now, Kathy asked, are any of our members in academia listening, watching the webinar? I'd like for them to chime in. I was hoping to hear from many of them tonight, and I was as well. That's why my voice is starting to fade on me, because I want to hear your questions or your concerns that I may be able to address. And keep in mind as well that it will always be an opportunity down the road to do some different things. One of the discussion items that came up was perhaps looking to change the requirements for some of the other offices, for example, so that an academic rep could run for secretary or treasurer, some of the other positions lower on the executive board. And we recommended that the board on the road look at that. So, and keep in mind as well that some of the academic reps are professional members and have the ability to vote on this proposal. I've heard a lot of people say that this would make changes that we can't vote on, and that's not true, because some of the academic reps retain their professional status per our document. And I'm sorry that the audio is not working. I would love to hear from you. Let's see if there are any more questions. Gerard says he's an instructor at Georgetown and Howard Universities in D.C. I'm honestly a little worried about taking away the academic rep. In my opinion, we should have one in every region. And there are some people who believe we should have more regional directors, but that was not the direction that the board opted to go. As you know, there was once upon a time when we had 10 regional directors, and then we went to 6, and now we're at 4. And thank you, Gerard, for offering an academic perspective. Do you have any thoughts on other things that you would like to see from the academic representative? Are there any other questions about any of the other provisions in the proposal? Okay, Kathy Cheney just posted, I'd like to know how early the academic reps who are advisors for student testers are helping the students fundraise to get to the convention each year. That's been a burning question for me. And that's a great question. Fortunately, I can't speak to it, but I can tell you that the one student member on our committee, Janae Adams, student, she just graduated from Clark Atlanta, and her concern was she felt that students on campus needed more support from their advisors and just a better connection to NABJ. Some of our student chapters are really struggling. Some of our student chapters are really struggling to stay afloat. So she felt that they could use more support. Terry Allen, media-related members submitted questions beforehand. Have all of them been addressed? Let me see if I can find them. I don't see them. And from Kathy again, Benet and Kathy give tips each year to students almost immediately after the convention ends. And I see Benet posts all the time offering assistance to students. And so there's definitely a lot of work that could be done in that area. I know some chapters occasionally have sponsored students. Cheryl Smith brings students to the conventions, but we need more of that to give the students the opportunity to get all that training and all take advantage of all those workshops. I'm going to look at Terry's question. Okay. Terry asks, in the spirit of organizational transparency, who submitted these amendments to the governance board? Well, Terry, you're on the board of directors. So, as I mentioned earlier, any professional member or the board of directors can submit proposals to amend the Constitution. This particular proposal number one, came from the Constitution and Operating Procedures Committee, which is charged with the task of reviewing the Constitution and bringing forward any proposed changes. And just to walk you through the process, so an email went out saying this is the time, if you have a proposal for the Constitution, that it had to be submitted by February 7th. And so this committee, the Constitution committee, submitted our proposal to the board at its January meeting. Before the deadline, we had discussion with the board. We went back and tweaked some things, and then we submitted our proposal on February 7th. The second proposal, which we've mentioned as well, was submitted by Kathy Chaney. So that's that. Okay. Terry's question earlier, it was stated that the cost of savings was $2,900. So what is the financial breakdown by line item of the $5,000 cost savings that we desire to reduce the board for? And Terry, that's an annual cost. So over the 2-year period, it would be roughly the $5,000 for the election. That's just for the cost of the election. Then there are additional savings that would be realized by having fewer board members. So those are fewer members that have to travel, that have to stay in a hotel, and all of those things that go with board service. But I want to make sure that you understand that it's not just about cost savings, because in the overall size of the budget, that's a small amount. But this is about making NABJ and the board more efficient and more effective so that we meet the needs of the organization. But if you want to know a specific breakdown, I can get that for you. I think that was released at the board meeting. If you have my report, it's in there, but I can get that to you. Again, from Terry, how does this organization not value media-related members, educators, but promotes J-Shop, student projects, and more? So I reject the first part of that premise, but I will say this. Students are our future. They're the fastest growing segment of this membership. And if you look at our numbers, pretty soon they're going to be our boss because they are the future of the organization. So yes, we do promote J-Shop and student projects more for them. And I disagree that the organization does not value media-related members. I've already addressed his other question about the 3-year requirement. And from Lee Ivory, okay, give me a second, Terry. From Lee Ivory, I just wanted to say this was tough work for our committee. We were very sensitive to the idea of how the amendments would be perceived. These were tough choices for us, painful choices. We listened to a lot of voices and took into consideration many positions. But the bottom line is that the board is just too big. Election expenses aside, it's pretty expensive to bring folks in for meetings and such. The changes don't mute our members. If you desire, your voice can still be heard on any issue. This solution isn't perfect, but it's a first step in the right direction, hopefully. And that's absolutely true. We did. We spent weeks and weeks meeting, and there were things that we couldn't agree on. That was one of the questions in the Q&A, where there are things that weren't addressed. For example, the strategic plan recommended that we have a ladder system and elect our president 4 years out in advance. And some organizations do that so that the president has 2 years, the president-elect has 2 years to prepare and to get up to speed and be ready to hit the ground when he or she takes office. Well, we couldn't agree to that. We couldn't reach an agreement on it. There were some on the board who really wanted it, but in the end, we just couldn't get there. So again, that's work for another day. But we really tried to come up with something that we thought would work and move us to the next level and realize that there's always work to be done. And for Terry, yes, you're right. That the questions from, I'm not sure. I think he's trying to say that the questions that are under his name aren't directly from him, but those are questions or issues. They're members' questions. That's what he said. Okay. Benet says we've been listening to silence for more than 2 minutes. Is that right? And again, I'm sorry that we're having audio problems. Great. Other questions, other concerns? Let me look at this. Again, from Karen, I think we've addressed this, but I will read it for the group. Academic advisors nurture a constant and consistent lifeline for Black and Brown students to enter into our career field. To remove that influential presence and voice from the board is non-strategic and is NABJ brand defeating. Accepting of this proposed change for removal demonstrates that those academic advisors with the most influence on the success of their students who will continue our legacy, are not welcome, valued, or needed at the table where decisions are made. I don't understand the wisdom in doing that. And again, everybody has value and has a role and a place in NABJ. And I'm sorry that you feel that way, Karen. That is not the intent. That is not the intent. And nothing could be further from the truth. As I just mentioned, students are a large growing segment of the membership. And so, yes, we do need to mentor them and work with them. But is having a seat on the board the only way to do that? I would argue no, that through the committees, task forces, mentoring, the roles on campus, all of those things are ways to work with this important segment of the membership. And you don't have to be on the board to submit a proposal. There are many ways to still be effective and serve this group. And I think that's the conversation that would be helpful. How can we help make the academic rep a more effective group in terms of its mission, defining what that is beyond programming at the convention, because that membership is about more than planning a workshop at the convention. It should be a 12-year role. So what are we going to do the rest of the month? We're only at the convention for 4 days. Hi, Nikki. She just asked, was this webinar promoted before today? She just learned about it today and shared it with the Baltimore chapter members, but I didn't see this prior to today. Seems like it was short notice and possibly why we don't have many of the necessary voices. It was promoted both on the NABJ site and the national office sent out an email to every member. I did receive it. Okay, and Kathy said, all proposers were asked for the reason behind their submission. I think this webinar may have been avoided if, when the proposals were made public, the explanation was also made public. And the rationale was attached to the proposal. Perhaps you didn't scroll down far enough, but I personally helped put that document together, and it is there. Okay. And I'm not sure why she's still having problems. Terry Allen, transparency in a proactive manner matters. Agreed, Kathy. I'm not sure. This committee has been transparent. As you know, I outlined the process of how an amendment comes forward. So once the board approved it at the April meeting, the amendments were circulated to the entire membership. And again, I helped write that document. According to the Constitution, that document must be sent to the membership by June, well, roughly June 7th. It's 60 days before the start of the annual convention. So if the convention date is different, then that's different. So the amendments were circulated. They're in the minute. I don't know what else to tell you, how much more transparent we can be. I am available. I've made myself available once I heard that you had questions. So that's what we have to do, just talk it out. And I think the webinar is a good idea, and I don't mind doing it. Had we been able to do it even earlier, that would have been great in the process. But remember, voting just opened July 7th. So we're well within that window to begin to talk it out. People are just starting to really log on and look at them and decide how they would like to vote. So we've done our best to accommodate you and to address and answer your questions. My email is out there. If you need it, I'd be more than happy to provide that again before we hang up and to answer any additional questions or field questions from anyone who was not able to be on the call. July 1st is when the elections open. Thank you. We have about 10 minutes remaining. I want to be mindful of your time and mine as well. I do have another commitment. Kathy asked, when were the minutes circulated to the membership And I don't know the answer to that. You'll have to check with the national office or the board of directors. Yeah, some of your questions are beyond my pay grade. The name is asking, can it be posted in the members only section? Again, that's beyond me. Any questions related to the minutes? But we're journalists. We know how to get information, and certainly have the right to go to your respective representative. So if you're an academic rep and you want to know what happened at the board meeting in real time, and we all know the board meets quarterly, I suggest you go to your representative and say, hey, anything happened at the meeting? Anything we need to know? What's going on for our members? I encourage you to do that. And that's what I'm talking about in terms of holding board members accountable. But I'm going to ask you to be accountable for your membership as well. So it's great that you looked on the members only section. It's not there apparently, according to Kathy and Renee, but you do have access to your representatives as well. Kind of like calling your congressman or senator. Any additional questions? Concerns? Okay, well, last call. 8:53. Oh, wait, there's something. Terry Allen says, my thanks to Melanie and everyone calling in. Your voices are important. Thank you as we work to improve transparency and NABJ success all year round. Timeliness needs to be crucially readjusted for better impact. Thank you, Melanie. Awesomeness. I would agree with that. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. I know you're laughing. But thank you, Terry, for that comment, and thank everyone for taking time tonight. I know I rushed home to be a part of this call because it was important to me. And as several of you have brought up, I wanted to make sure that there was transparency, that I shared with you all that I could about the process, how we got here, and how we move forward. And at the end of the day, we're always NABJ family, and we're passionate about our organization. And as long as we keep doing that, we're going to be okay. And so I just want you to know, win, lose, or draw, you voted up, you voted down, you're still going to be my friends and family, and I love you, and I love NABJ. And that's why I do the work that I do, and I know you as well, and that's why you took time to be on this call. So don't hesitate to reach out if you want to talk it out some more. And at NABJ, when we get to Miami, we're going to hug it out, okay? So with that, I want to call for a motion to adjourn, but I don't think we need that. The parliamentarian and me can't resist. So again, thank you, everyone. If you're coming to NABJ, I look forward to seeing you in Miami. Stay cool in this heat and take good care. Right. Good night.